All right, gang, let's work on lesson 1.5, special angle pair relationships. We're going to be talking about all different kinds of angles, lots of vocabulary in this one, so you want to pay attention. This would be a good lesson for flashcards or something like that. So, our goal for today is to identify 5 new different special angle pairs. 5 is a lot. We have to pay attention to our vocabulary, make sure that we get this all down. So, let's give it a start. The first one that we're going to talk about are complementary angles. Those are 2 angles that add to 90 degrees. It is very important that you have 2 angles that add to 90 degrees. So, if I give you this picture right here, is that complementary? And the answer is no, because that is only one angle. But if I take that and divide it up into 2 angles, now I have complementary angles. I have the first angle and I have the second angle, and together they make 90 degrees. So 90-degree angles are 2 angles that add to 90. Another example could be something like 20 degrees and 70 degrees. Does 20 plus 70 make 90? It does, and that makes them complementary. It must be 2 angles that add up to 90. The definition of supplementary would be 2 angles that add to 180 degrees. Again, our supplementary angles, something that would look like this. Is that supplementary angles? Well, the question is, does that add up to 180 degrees? And the answer is yes. But is it 2 angles? And the answer there is no. As soon as I divide that, now I have 2 angles, 1 angle and 2 angle. And those 2 angles, angle 1 and angle 2, now add up to 180 degrees. Those are supplementary angles. Now, here's a silly trick. This is something that I kind of like to remember. The C from complementary can turn into a 9, which helps remind me that we have 90 degrees. And the S from supplementary, if I draw a line, can turn into an 8, which helps me remember 180 degrees. So that's just a little trick that I have to help you remember those 2 angles. Now the next name that we have are adjacent angles. And adjacent angles are 2 angles that have a shared side and a common vertex. Basically, adjacent angles have to be neighbors to each other. They do not have any special angle name. They just have to have 2 angles with a common vertex and a shared side. That makes angle 1 and angle 2 adjacent. But if I draw angles like this, angle 1 and angle 2, are they adjacent angles? And the answer is no. Why not? They have a shared side, but they each have their own vertex, so they do not have a common vertex. So that diagram is not a good diagram. Adjacent angles are 2 angles that have a shared side and a common vertex. Now, go back and look at the beginning of our notes right up here. The first example that I gave you for complementary angles, these guys right here, are those adjacent? And the answer is yes, they are adjacent. They are adjacent and complementary. Look at the second example we had for supplementary. Are those 2 angles adjacent? And the answer is yes, they are adjacent and supplementary. Do all complementary and supplementary angles have to be adjacent? And the answer is no, because these guys right here are not adjacent. Because they are not next to each other, they do not touch at all, they are not what we call neighbors. So that is adjacent, supplementary, complementary, supplementary, and adjacent. What I'm going to have you do is pause and jump up to page 2. All right, here's our vocabulary terms. Question number 4 and number 5. Remember we said we were going to do 5 of them. The first one that we have here is a linear pair. And a linear pair are adjacent angles formed by opposite rays. Now think about what is a ray. Remember, a ray is that thing that starts and goes in one direction only. If you have opposite rays, you have to have another ray that starts at the same place and it goes in the exact opposite direction. That is what we call a straight line. As soon as we divide that, now we have a linear pair. We have a pair of adjacent angles that make a straight line. So, a linear pair can be upside down. They can be 90 degrees. All of these are examples of linear pairs. Two angles that make a straight line that are adjacent to each other. Now let's talk about our vertical angles. And vertical angles are what we call opposite angles, and I'll show you that in the diagram, that are formed by intersecting segments or lines. So if we intersect two lines or segments, notice that we have 4 angles here, 4 main angles, 4 single angles. And the vertical angles are the ones that are opposite of each other. That means in this picture, angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical. Conversely, angle 1 and angle 3 are also vertical. Now, when we study these more, we will discover that vertical angles are always equal. That right there is something that you need to know. So, whether you got it now or you get it in a little bit, make sure that you always know vertical angles will always be equal. Now, what I want you to do is stop your video, work on some of your practice problems, and if you get stuck, you can come back and follow along on our practice problems and our notes.